If you're doing a parve kind of a cholent in a crock pot, like beans and I don't know, potatoes and carrots, I don't know. You said you had to have it half cooked first before Shabbos?
Correct. It has to be half
Oh, okay.
cooked by sunset.
Thank you.
Man, if you have meat, you can put it in right before Shabbos, which is what Sharon said too. Either 3 hours before or right before Shabbos.
Okay. So now we're going to talk about a new topic. We're going to start off talking today about.
We can't hear you, Yossi.
Oh. Do you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Now we are going
Rabbi,
to.
excuse me. What are you talking about now?
I'm about to get to it. I'm about to tell everyone. Today, we are going to talk about, the first halacha that we're going to learn today, which is in chapter 72 in Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, halacha 21, is about insulating food before Shabbos. If a person wants to keep the food warm, keep the food at its hot temperature, one might insulate food. So is what we're going to learn, in what manner is it permitted to insulate food before Shabbos, and when is it forbidden to insulate food before Shabbos? So the rule is you're allowed to insulate food before Shabbos if the item that you're using to insulate the food is not an item that will add heat to the food. All what the item will accomplish is that the food should remain at its same temperature. For the food to keep its temperature, but not to cause the food to become hotter. Not to heat up the food more. Just that the food should remain heated. Then it's permissible. If the item that is heating up the food, if the item that is insulating the food is causing the food to become hotter, it is forbidden. That's the general rule. What's the reason that it's forbidden to insulate food? That is to insulate food with an item that is going to make the food hotter. Last class we said that food, if you cook food on coals, there's a problem when you're going to take out the pot. What's the problem? When you take out the pot, it's going to cause the coals to move. And when the coals move, some of the coals are going to burn more, and some are going to burn less. Which both of those things are forbidden on Shabbos. It's forbidden to make it's forbidden to make a fire or to add to a fire, to make a fire larger. And it's forbidden to extinguish a fire or to make a fire it's forbidden to extinguish a fire or to make a fire not as large. But when you're insulating, if you're just insulating with something that's not, you're not concerned that it's going to make, you're not concerned that the fire is going to, that it's going to do, that you're going to do a forbidden labor of burning a fire or extinguishing a fire, why is it forbidden to insulate with something that adds heat? So the reason is because it was very common in those days to insulate food with coals. And the rabbis decided that we have to say that it's forbidden to insulate food with any item that's going to add heat, in order that one won't make the mistake to come to insulate food with coals. So that's just some background for this halacha. Another idea that I want to point out is that there's laws of insulating food before Shabbos, and there's laws of insulating food on Shabbos. Right now, we're only going to learn about the laws of insulating food before Shabbos. Later in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, in chapter 80, it discusses when one wants to insulate food on Shabbos. Let's learn. We're going to learn halacha 21 now inside. And afterwards, I'm going to speak of some other practical cases of insulating food. Hamat min kafet be'erev Shabbos b'sei chaguma l'tzarich Shabbos. One who insulates a vessel that has coffee in it before Shabbos. They put this vessel of coffee in a pit in order to have hot coffee on Shabbos. And one covers the pit with pillows or things like pillows, in order that the coffee should remain hot, in order that the coffee should be hot. If one is insulating this vessel of coffee, let's say there's a mug of coffee, one is insulating it in sand, which in the times of the Mishnah, sand was something that added heat. If you insulated with sand, it would add heat. I'm not sure nowadays. Sand doesn't add heat. Maybe in places where it's very hot, if you have the sand over there, it would add heat. So if one was insulating let's say a mug of coffee in sand, the law is asur lahatmin kol hakli b'sei chachol. It is forbidden to insulate the entire vessel in the sand. Vafilu ina matmin kol hakli ela miksasa. Even if one doesn't insulate the entire vessel, but only part of the vessel, va'al miksasa mechase b'begadim v'chadema, and then the remainder of the vessel that is not insulated by sand, it is covered by clothing or something similar to clothing. In a manner that the whole vessel is covered from all its sides. So this is a very important principle to the laws of insulating. In order for the insulating to be forbidden, in order for the Torah to consider it insulating, that is forbidden, it has to be entirely insulated. If it's not, if part of the pot or the vessel, part of the vessel is uncovered, even just a small amount, it is not considered insulated. So gam zeh aser. Also, this would be forbidden. So whether the vessel is entirely buried in the sand and it's just covered with a pillow on the top of the vessel, or the sand is only the vessel is only partially buried in the sand, and the rest of the vessel is covered by clothing, In both cases, it would be forbidden to have that vessel to insulate in such a manner before to insulate in such a manner before Shabbos and for it to remain insulated on Shabbos. Elot tzarich lasis ba'ifin zeh. Shakli asher b'seichei hakafe yatmine rak at chetzei oy ad shlishisei b'seichachol. Rather, it's necessary to insulate in this manner, that the vessel which has the coffee in it, it should be buried only halfway or a third of the way in the sand. So only half of the vessel or a third of the vessel should be buried in the sand. The rest of the vessel should have airspace around it. V'yitin alagumba daf yechape alav kli she'aver b'nai uveina kli shebeseichai hakafe. And you should put on top of the pit, you should put a board or another vessel in order that there should be airspace between this vessel and the vessel that has the coffee. Meaning, if you put a board on top of this pit, and this board is going to be longer than the top of the vessel that has the coffee, then when you're going to put a blanket around this board, the blanket won't touch the vessel that has the coffee. It will be around it, but it won't be touching it. And if something is just around a vessel that has food, but it's not touching the vessel that has food, then it's permissible. It's not forbidden because of insulating. And then after you have this board that is longer than the cover of the vessel that has the coffee, then you're able to drape down clothing or pillows or something similar, let's say blankets, that will go down around the vessel that has the coffee, but not touching the walls of the vessel that has the coffee in it.
Does the board have to not touch also?
The board's able to touch the coffee.
The board is able to touch.
Yeah, but because the walls of the vessel that has the coffee in it, they don't have the blanket touching them or the garments that are coming down. They're not touching the walls. So it's, even though the board is touching the top of the cover of the coffee mug, let's say, but it's not going to be considered insulating since there's airspace on the side, on the walls of this vessel.
You keep saying a board. Can you put a little plate? I mean, does it have a board? I think of a slab of wood. That's not so handy around the kitchen. Is there something else you can put on top of the coffee mug?
Yeah, anything would be permissible.
Like
so I'm going to speak soon about more practical cases. This is, in those days, in the days of the Shulchan Aruch, that's how it would, they would just use they found some wood and they would use it. Our method, since we have a kitchen, it's very different by us. So I'm going to speak practically how it is. What are some practical cases for us?
Before you get to that, say during Shabbos you've done this legally, but now you want to get the cup so you can drink from it. Do you have to be extremely fast in taking things apart?
What would be, you don't have to, you're saying if you did this in a way that was permissible, when you take it off on Shabbos, you have to do it quickly? Is that the question?
Yes.
No, it wouldn't have to be done quickly. But we'll see more of you don't have to do it quickly, but you're not
Yeah.
allowed to, once you take it off, you're not allowed to put it back on.
But you have the intent of taking it off to drink. So while it's half off, half on, the leniency is you have the intent to take it out.
When it's half on and half on,
See, it's buried. Lower half is buried in the
That means
sand.
that they're doing
The upper
something.
half has a blanket draped around it. And
Yeah,
now it's
yeah.
time to drink.
Not that it's useful
When you
anyway.
take off the upper half, the lower half is illegal, but you have the intent of pulling it out of the sand in a moment or so. That must be
So
legal because
the
of your
sand-
intent, right?
So there's no problem in taking it out of the sand, because the sand is not, it's not like coals. Coals would cause, if it would be in coals, there would be a problem, because when you take it out of the coals, it will cause the coals to burn more or extinguish. Taking it out of the sand isn't causing any forbidden labor. No forbidden labor is happening when you take it out of the sand. So
Yeah,
there's
my question picks up where you said that if the insulation was not changing the temperature, it was legal, but you still had to have the exposed part covered.
If the installation was not changing the tent,
Yeah, it's not hot sand, and it's not coals. Like it's cold sand. There's no sand. It's
right?
something.
So then,
So then
so-
half in a pillow, half in a bunch of pillows, but half is sticking out, so you have to put a plate and drape it. Now the
so
question
if
is,
if
can
it's
you
not in
undo
any,
that during
let me
Shabbos?
make something clear. If it's not in any hot, if it's insulated in something that's not going to add heat, but just
Right.
retain the heat,
Right?
before Shabbos, it's able to be totally insulated, covered from
During
all
Shabbos,
sides.
you said
before
during Shabbos
Shabbos.
you couldn't have an exposed portion of the vessel.
Before Shabbos, it's able to be totally insulated if it's insulated with something that's retaining the heat.
Okay, but didn't you say that the insulation had to cover it completely? Otherwise, you needed to put a plate on top and drape or blanket around it?
So that's with sand, which is adding heat.
Well, forget sand. I'm sorry. I want a neutral insulator. I understand sand. Adding heat is
Oh,
no
so
good.
you're wondering if you have a neutral insulator, you don't
Yeah.
need the drape. You don't need it could be totally. It could be fully, the insulation could be fully around it, touching the pot.
But didn't you say that it had to be completely insulated? If some part of it was still exposed, you were talking about a cup of coffee at the time.
So we were always in this halacha, we were always talking about that it had sand around it. So since sand adds heat, and there has to be a part of it exposed.
Well, we wouldn't.
This halacha in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch was always speaking about sand, which adds heat. So therefore, it has to be a part of it exposed.
No, the entire halacha that you've been talking about only applies to warm or hot sand and coals.
Yeah, but I want to talk about outside other cases. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I didn't get that.
So to summarize, to give a summary, if you're insulating with something that's adding heat, it is not allowed to be insulated entirely. There has to be that some of the container that the food is in has to be exposed to airspace. And this is even if it's just a little airspace. If there's a little airspace between the container and, let's say, a piece of clothing. Now, what's the definition of something adding heat? Even if that thing that is adding heat isn't entirely around the container, but it's only partially around the container, and the rest of the container is insulated with something that doesn't add heat, it is considered as it's being insulated with something that adds heat. Now let's speak some practical cases. What if a person has, based on what we learned, what would be the law if someone has a pot of soup and they want the pot of soup to be totally covered with a blanket, entirely covered with a blanket? Would they be able to put that pot of soup on their stovetop? Let's say on the blech, on the sheet of metal that is on a stove that's on. Anyone know the answer? So the answer is that would be forbidden, because the food, the blanket is, it's true that the blanket is something that doesn't add heat, but since the blanket is on the stovetop is something that adds heat, it is considered as if you're insulating with you're doing an insulation that is adding heat. So you wouldn't be able to put have the food, you wouldn't be able to have a pot on a stove, on a blech or a stovetop being insulated with anything, because since that the pot is under the pot, there is a oven that it's on, there's a stove that's on, it'll be forbidden.
Rabbi?
A way that it's permitted.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Can you cover the pot though with its cover, or is that considered adding heat? You
Yes.
can. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So covering the pot is the law of insulation only refers to around the pot. So covering the pot is part of the pot. It's not considered there. It's not forbidden to insulate food. It's forbidden to insulate a pot that has food. That's the, so for instance, since it's not forbidden to insulate food, but it's forbidden to insulate a pot that has food, you're able on Shabbos to go and take tinfoil and you finished eating and you want to wrap the schnitzel that you have left over. You're able to wrap it around, because even though on Shabbos you could only use something that on Shabbos you're not even able to insulate with something that retains heat, but it's not forbidden to insulate food. It's forbidden to insulate a container that has food. Let's go to another case. A pot of soup. If it's off the stovetop, it's just on the counter. In such a case, one would be able to take a blanket and wrap it around before Shabbos, before sunset. Since that's a case of insulating something that doesn't add any heat. There's no fire that's causing the blanket to be hot. That's around, that the blanket is near. There's no fire that the blanket is becoming hot from. The blanket is just remaining the same temperature as the blanket was always.
May I ask something? I mean, you're referring to when
Yes.
you say a blanket, I think of a big thing that fits on a bed. I mean, any piece of cloth or material that is smaller. It doesn't have to be like a blanket from the bed. I mean, when you say blanket,
Right.
like
It doesn't.
what do you mean by
No,
blanket?
it could, anything. I was referring to like a blanket. It could be a smaller blanket, like maybe just a thinner blanket, or even
Oh,
the idea is that it has the discussion is only when it's covering the entire pot. So for instance, a napkin's never going to fit around the entire pot, or even just a shirt or you need something a little larger to fit around the entire pot. It could be smaller than a
A
blanket.
towel.
Maybe it depends the size of the pot. A smaller pot, let's say a towel, will be able to fit around the entire pot.
Okay.
But a bigger pot, even a towel won't fit around the entire pot. Now let's go to something a little bit more. What about sometime if you want to put kishka in your cholent, and you put the kishka in tin foil. So the kishka's in tin foil, and you put it in the crock pot. So the cholent has beans, potatoes, meat, whatever is in the cholent, and then you have the kishka that's in tin foil in the cholent. Is that being considered insulating with something? It's definitely something adding heat because it's getting heated from the there's definitely heat there. It's getting hot from the crock pot, but is that considered insulating? So the answer is if the tin foil that the kishka is in, part of it is not is above where the cholent is. It's not fully immersed in the cholent, but some of it is on top of the cholent. Then it's not fully insulated. There's some parts of the tin foil that isn't buried in the cholent. Then it'll be permissible, which that's usually how it is. If it would be totally immersed, then it would be necessary to make a hole in the tin foil in order that you don't insulate with something that's adding heat. So if the tin foil that has the kishka is totally immersed in the cholent, then you would need to make a hole in the tin foil, and by making a hole makes it takes care of the issue. Usually, what I was told is usually it will float to the top, the kishka, and it won't be totally immersed in the cholent, so you won't have any issue with insulating. Okay, let's go to the next halacha. Halacha 22. Now we're going to learn about what should one mention before Shabbos to remind others that this should be done before Shabbos. It's right before Shabbos. What should a person check and see? Was this taken care of already? And we have to make sure that Shabbos doesn't come without this being taken care of.
Rabbi Yossi, a quick question.
Yeah.
When you're talking about the kishka, where's the point where you go from you're not insulating the kishka, you're actually cooking the kishka? Like I missed something about when is the kishka going in? Are you talking about if it's going in on Shabbos or before Shabbos? Because the kishka is being cooked in the cholent, not insulated. I guess there's two different ways to do it. You can insulate it or cook it. But I wanted to get the difference between them.
Okay. I'm not sure with the cooking part. I'm saying I was talking more about the insulating part. Is there a problem with cooking kishka? If it's
no, I'm saying once you made a couple of holes in the tin foil, I would think that you're no longer using it as an insulator. You're using it to cook the kishka equally with the other stuff that's in the kishka. You're cooking the kishka along with the cholent.
Right, that could be.
Instead of just insulating it. That's my question.
So you're saying if there's a couple holes, it would be cooking. I think that you would have to be careful about cooking, even if there wouldn't be holes. If the kishka is able to become hot, cooked through the heat of the crock pot, even if there wouldn't be holes, then you would have to make sure that there's not a problem with cooking.
But I'm saying
So
you're taking the
problem with
kishka and putting it into the cholent before Shabbos, and then what? What's the difference between tin foil or not tin foil, or holes or not holes? You're putting the kishka in the cholent before Shabbos.
Keep it warm.
I can see maybe it's a problem because maybe it's not connected to the meat. You're talking about meat is able to be put in raw, and that gives like a permissibility to the whole cholent. But I'll just I'll mute myself and figure out what if you could tell us what if you know the difference with between using it as a or keeping warm and cooking.
Excuse me, can I add something here, please, about kishka? Usually it
Yeah.
has to be fully cooked before you even put it any place. It's the nature of sausage that everything kind of has to be cooked first before you're going to add it to anything, because otherwise it would be awful. I mean, it wouldn't be good because I don't know if you've ever made kishka, but it's quite a thing to do. And I just had to add that because this whole thing is kind of bothering me. It has to be fully cooked before you even put the tin foil and everything around it, in my opinion, so that the kishka is cooked and it isn't like raw when you're eating it after you're insulating it or something. Do you know what I'm saying? Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt, but anyway, my 2 points about kishka, but go ahead.
Okay, that could be. I'm not so sure, David, so much about the. It could be that it's not. It's already, if it's already cooked, then I'm not sure if there will be a problem of cooking if it's already cooked. I'll try to look into it, and but I think it's just I was just more mentioning about the insulating, that do you get into a problem with insulating if there aren't holes? Let's go to
You
the
may
next
not eat it
halacha.
on. If it's already cooked, you may eat it, but
Halacha 22. Samuch l'chashecha yishol la'anshe beisai b'lashon raka. On Friday afternoon, right before close to sunset, one should ask the members of his house in a gentle voice, in a gentle tone. Hifrashtem challah. Was challah separated? Remember, we learned that when you bake dough, if there's a certain measurement of dough baked, if you're baking dough, if there's a certain measurement of dough, there's the mitzvah to separate challah. So you should ask, did you separate challah? Because if one didn't separate challah, then it's forbidden to eat the bread that if one didn't separate part of the dough, then it's forbidden to eat that any bread that was cooked with that dough on Shabbos, any challah that was cooked from that dough on Shabbos. There are those that now this type of question would only be necessary if a person bakes challah at home. If they buy challah, or that week they weren't baking, they already baked the previous week, it wouldn't be necessary to ask this question. Also, there are those that say that if one knows that by the name, but the fact that it has the name challah, it will remind someone to separate challah. So if you feel that it's like that by you, it's not so necessary. Then it could be that it's unnecessary to ask this question. And also, he should remind them to light the Shabbos candles. Some other examples that it could be beneficial to remind before Shabbos. The idea is that the idea that of this halacha that you should remind one before Shabbos is that there are certain things that will not be able to be done on Shabbos. So therefore, a little before Shabbos, you should remind others, or either take or make or think about or think to yourself that I take care of these things. So some other examples of things to that could be beneficial to ask others or think about that I do them before Shabbos is that I set the lights how I want them to be set before Shabbos. I'm not allowed to turn on or off the light on Shabbos. So I could ask, did I check the bedroom light I want off, the bathroom light I want on, other lights I want on or off, check if the lights are good. Another example is to see if the way I want my kitchen running on Shabbos. Do I want to have a blech? Do I want to take the food off the stove? Do I want to turn off the oven? All these things, it's good to check, good things to think about, and maybe ask if you have someone that you want to check if you think that they have done it. Right, it's good to check before Shabbos.
Rabbi Lifshitz, Rabbi
There's
Lifshitz, you're breaking up because of background noise. of
Yeah,
other
there's
people.
static. It's like static.
I'll mute others. Is the background from me or from others? Let me see. I'll mute everyone. Okay. Okay, you with me? Okay, great. Another example of something to take care of before Shabbos is to set any Shabbos timers. Some people, let's say you want to have the AC turn on during parts of Shabbos. We want to just set the AC, turn on the AC, the air conditioner, or heating. So here are some examples of things that we're not able to take care of on Shabbos. It's good to know, it's good to remember that before Shabbos to make sure that they're taken care of. That's
Rabbi
Yassi,
Yassi, you're still breaking up
Yeah.
a little bit. I don't know if you have two microphones on or not, but you're still breaking up.
Okay. Give me a moment. Let me see. Okay. I'm not sure. I'll try my best. Did you hear the last point? Anything was missed? Half. I'll go through it again. I'll try my best. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the technical issue is. Other good things to take care of before Shabbos is the lights. See which lights to turn on and which ones to turn off. The kitchen, things in the kitchen. Make sure that there's a blech if you want to have a blech, or if you want to take the food off the stove, take the food out or turn off the oven, or to put the oven on Shabbos mode. Then also setting timers for Shabbos. Let's say you have timers for the lights or for the air conditioner or just to turn on the air conditioner. Another example is to turn off one's phone before Shabbos. These are all things that are not allowed to be done on Shabbos, and one should try and one should be careful to check that they're done before Shabbos. Let's go to halacha 23, the last halacha of this chapter. This halacha will talk about that one should check one's pockets before Shabbos in order that one doesn't, that they should be fit for, in order that when Shabbos comes, there shouldn't be anything that isn't supposed to be in one's pockets on Shabbos. Chayiv Adam Lemashmesh Bevigadav Be'erev Shabbos Kaidim HaShabbos. One is obligated to check one's clothing pockets Friday before Shabbos. For what reason? Im ein macha techuva behem, ayim ein eze davar bakisim. To see that there's no needle in one's pocket or anything else in one's pocket. Vafilu b'makom sheyesh erev. Even if one lives in a place that there's an erev, which an erev is a fence that goes around a certain place. You could either have it going around a city, or it could be an area, or it could go around just in one's yard. It doesn't have to be. It's a fence to make it permissible to carry on Shabbos outside, wherever the erev is, wherever this fence is. It doesn't always have to look exactly like a fence. There's a lot of laws of how what makes something a kosher erev. We're not going to get into it now. It's discussed.
I wanted to make a point here. Some of you don't say the piece called Bamim Madlikin, but in there's a statement about from the Gemara, I think, about checking your pockets for things that you might be carrying. This can serve as a reminder that nothing should be in your pocket in case you're in an area without an Erev or a functioning Erev.
Right. Very good point. Yeah, that's the reason why they have it in Bamim Madlikin in this prayer, in order that it could remind one to do it. So carrying from, it's forbidden to carry outside unless there is a fence, unless there is an erev. So even if there is an erev, you should check your pockets. Why? Because maybe you have in your pockets, there's in one's pockets something that is muksa, something that is not supposed to be touched on Shabbos. There are certain things that one's not supposed to touch on Shabbos, not to move. And we're not going to get into the whole discussion of it now. It's discussed later in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. God willing, we'll get there. And then we'll discuss it. But there's certain things that you're not allowed to touch. So one should check their pockets to see that there's not anything that is not allowed to be moved on Shabbos in one's pockets. For instance, let's say a phone or a pen. One should check that they're not in one's pockets. One should check before Shabbos. besides the clothing that one is wearing, besides that one should check the clothing that one's wearing, also you should check clothing that you plan on wearing on Shabbos, even if you're not wearing it right before Shabbos. If, let's say, tomorrow you want to wear you're going to wear you're going to dress differently. You're going to have different clothing. You should check that clothing as well, the pockets of those clothing. Or if you're going to put on a coat later on Shabbos, you should check your coat pockets. If one forgot to check one's pockets before Shabbos and only checked on Shabbos, what they should do is that they find something that is not allowed to be moved on Shabbos, they should turn upside down their clothing or their jacket, coat, and to shake out the object, the item that is not permissible, that is forbidden to touch. Shabbos. That's the end of this first chapter of Hilchos Shabbos in the Kislev, chapter 72. And with this, we'll end today's class.